Hi everyone. My name is Jeong, and I'm going to be the first to present my MRP. Hope to give a good start. And thanks Dr. Chandros for his help with my MRP. And my MRP is to design a turn-based puzzle video game for reducing stress and promoting well-being. I made a prototype to demonstrate the research result, and let me show you a trailer of what I made, just giving an impression of what the game is look like. Okay, let's go. Okay, so speaking of why I made this, we have all experienced how the pandemic changed our life, and lack of connection, no social gathering, travel restriction, all of this cause many people have more or less mental issues. And statistics show that 41% of US adults have poor behavior or mental health symptoms during the pandemic. And meanwhile, as more people stay at home, video game industry is growing rapidly, and research show that 82% of global consumers play video games and watch video game content during the pandemic lockdowns. So playing video games have been becoming the most popular leisure activities due to the pandemic. And apart from that, health experts also agree that video games can be a beneficial stress buster during COVID times. In March 2020, the WHO teamed up with the game industry to create the Play Apart Together campaign, which encouraged individuals to stay at home, play video games, and practice social distancing. So, in fact, video games have been used as supplemental therapies to deal with mental disorder. However, games designed and used as treatment for mental problem are usually not that playful. On the other hand, commercial video games are created to make profits. They usually do not pay close attention to one's mental health. These games often contain elements such as violence or potential gambling that may have a negative impact on individuals' well-being. So, this project aims to fill the gap between commercial video games and the games designed as therapy, applying psychological theories related to promoting well-being and reducing stress to create a research-based video game. In general, the process of this project has three parts: research, ideation, and implementation. For the research part, the main takeaways from the literature are that first, games should give players a sense of autonomy and competence. And second, the game should try to balance players' skill and challenges in the game to keep players in an ideal state called the flow state, where players could lose sense of time passing and fully engage in the game. Last, chance elements in games can be a double-edged sword, as on the one hand, it raises players' curiosity and makes a surprise, which is a great source for joy. On the other hand, it may cause potential addiction or gambling. So while doing research, I began to craft a game idea. My main game mechanics was highly inspired from games like Hitman Go and Laura Go. The main concept is a turn-based board or puzzle game, which integrates breath and meditation exercise into game economy system. I'll explain it later in my game. Finally, after forming the main game mechanics, it was time to implement it. I use Unity, which is a popular cross-platform game engine, to make the entire game. I benefit a lot from online resources as well. Okay, so it's time to show my game itself. Give me a minute. Okay, I designed a logo for my game. Ego means self, which indicates this game is a journey for self-exploration. Let's get started. Okay, here is a beginner guide to teach players how to move their character. So the board is very simple. Players just use A, W, S, D keys on their keyboards to move the character. Okay, then they can go next level. Here, all levels are presented. Players can navigate between different levels. And these levels are designed like a diorama representing different scenes. And the entire game is a journey for players to travel to different places. So let's explore this game deeply. Let's go next level. Apart from the character, which represent the players themselves, there are 3 types of enemies: static, spin, and patrol. And all these enemies will attack players if the player is right in front of them, like this. And when the player is attacked, the level will start over again. And so the goal for players is to find a best path to reach their goal, point. And also there are two types of abilities that the players can use to help them reach the goal. As shown in the left bottom corner, one is shooting an arrow, the other is silence enemy. So if I silence an enemy, the enemy will not attack me for 1 turn. It only works for 1 turn, and you can also shooting an arrow to remove enemy from the board. Okay, as you can notice, using these abilities will cost energy points, which is shown on the right upper corner. And here's the question: how can we gain the energy points back? So this is the interesting part. So players can do breath practice or meditation to gain the energy points. And here I implement probability. So each time players have a chance to gain more energy points. This is based on probability. And let me show you. So you can either doing breath practice to reduce stress. This is a called boxing breath technique. It's very simple. There are 4 taps. You breath in and hold for 4 seconds, and then breath out, and then hold for a second again, and repeat. Okay. Oh, we are lucky. We are lucky. We got 4 points. Usually you got 2 energy points. So for meditating part, it's similar. And there is an instruction for you to you can follow the instruction or do your own comfortable approach. So this instruction is very simple. You just find a quiet place and close your eyes, then repeat a word or sound as you breathe. Okay, that's pretty much about this game. Then The next step of this project will be fixing existing bugs, and then conducting player testing to verify its effectiveness and improve overall experience based on feedback collected from the testing. Okay, thank you very much. That's pretty much about my MRP.
Always was a good thief.
That you was. Yeah, get out of here.
The many miles we walk, the many things we learn.
This was a scene from Red Dead Redemption 2 that changed my life. When the COVID hit the world, I had just received an offer of admission to the Master of Digital Media program. The worldwide disaster interrupted my admission and visa process. During these stressful times, I turned to video games to relieve my anxiety and protect my mental health. And I played video games more than ever, the whole spring and summer of 2020. I played Red Dead Redemption 2, Spider-Man PS4, The Last of Us, God of War, Journey, Monument Valley, and many games. As I played more, I noticed something interesting is happening with the soundtrack in these games. It didn't matter how long my rides take in Red Dead Redemption 2 or how many streets I pass, shooting webs and swinging in Spider-Man. The music kept playing and adapting to the environment and my actions seamlessly. For example, if a peaceful horse riding in Red Dead Redemption 2 turns to a shoot fight, music becomes more energetic and active to add tension and excitement. The adaptive music significantly impacted the narrative and created an immersive experience for me. Deciding when to change the music and how to change it seamlessly is a highly complex and complicated problem because of the unpredictability of gameplay. Therefore, I decided to figure out how adaptive music works and find new applications for it. There wasn't a video game music course in our program, so I designed my own video game music course with the help of my fantastic supervisor, Dr. Christopher Alexander, known as the video game professor. He suggested studying the soundtrack of the video game Gorogoa, composed by Joel Korelitz. He is one of the great composers in the video game industry who has composed the original soundtrack for Death Stranding, Halo Infinite, and recently Eastward for Nintendo Switch. Gorogoa is an interactive story within 4 tiles inside a 2x2 panel. It's about the story of a boy who goes on a journey to find the meaning of life. The game consists of various unique puzzles that he should solve by clicking on objects and moving the tiles. Each tile contributes to part of each level's story, While a tile might present a completely different environment, they all work in conjunction towards one goal and are closely related. The structure of the game enabled Joel to treat it like a loop machine. He created loops that are always compatible, and the music you hear is unique to how you arrange the tiles and objects inside them. In a way, the player is the composer of the soundtrack. With such structure, music can smoothly adapt to each scene's mood. The music not only sets the atmosphere, but it also guides the player to move forward. The game doesn't have any instructions or dialogues. You know you're on the right path when you hear certain sounds or melodies. This sound means that you have solved a puzzle. Red Dead Redemption 2 also used a similar approach, sequencing and mixing layers of loops on top of each other. It's called horizontal and vertical mixing. However, Joel's approach is a bit different. His loops are always compatible, which is sophisticated considering the problem of rhythm and harmony in tonal music. His work was inspired by a project called In B Flat.
My life's work, she says, but it isn't her life's work. You see, we store information like an Escher painting. It shouldn't.
I decided to try this approach and make a short piece consisting of several loops that are compatible. This is the result. I can play, for example, the piano and add any of the other instruments at any time. Rhythm and harmony aren't stopping me anymore. To give you an idea of how dynamic this approach is, look at these music lines. This is how music works in Red Dead Redemption 2. Woody Jackson adds or drops specific layers of music or instruments at certain points using loops. This approach is great for making melodic music, but since the lines should be rhythmically and harmonically in sync, loops can be added only at specific points. With Joel's approach inspired by In B Flat project, you can add any line at any point. The great thing about this approach is that music can be played for a long time without becoming repetitive, because it takes a very long time for the loops to get back to the same point where they started together in the beginning, and the piece is constantly changing. This is perfect for creating ambient music or sound atmospheres. Another thing that I noticed is that Gorogoa doesn't have a specific melody. I cannot remember and sing its tune, but Joel has created a musical atmosphere, a sound world that I recognize. This is called soundscape. Cities have soundscapes. Downtown has a specific sound, and suburb has a different sound. Toronto sound is different from Tehran sound. This made me think about great opportunities for gamification of music in urban environments as soundscape. I discussed this with my dear friend Rouzbe Svandarmaz, who is an amazing musician. He said by implementing adaptive music in real settings, you aren't playing a video game anymore, you're actually in the game. Since music and sound are universal languages, they don't need explanation, and such an approach can also provide accessibility for disabled people. For example, imagine a blind person enters the bank. The music of the bank adapts to the number of people in the line. The blind person can realize if the line is short or long by listening to the bank's tune. This is just an example, but isn't it amazing? I hope you've enjoyed my research. Thank you so much for staying with me.
The building of a shrine, only just to burn. That's the way it is. That's the way it is.
Hi everyone, my name is Rachel and I'm part of the MDM 8.0 cohort. In my 4 years of architecture school and 2 years of working in the industry, I've always been drawn to the more creative aspects of architecture, from 3D modeling, visualization, and interactive installations. Naturally, my thesis became an analysis exploring the intersection between storytelling, game engines, and architecture. Today's presentation begins by exploring the gaps and deficiencies in today's architectural visualization, continues with analyzing the elements of themed entertainment, and concludes with the potential of integrating game engines into the architecture workflow. We begin with some of the current problems that are ultimately rooted in architectural design: misrepresentation, ocular centralism, and physics. As technology advances, renderings, walkthroughs, and money shot renders plague the architecture workflow, often interpreted as realistic but misleading. Money shot renders refer to the most visually appealing view of design, often being an aerial perspective that users would not experience from a human level, making them misleading. Another example are wide-angled renderings of home listings, a manipulation of space perception to make it seem more spacious than reality. Listing photos are often taken with 16 to 24 mm focal length cameras, whereas the most accurate focal length to the human eye is 50 mm. Humans have two types of visions: focus vision, where the user is disconnected from the space, and peripheral vision, where the user is part of the space and experience. Focused vision is often attributed to ocular centralism, the privileging of vision over other senses. Peripheral vision addresses the other senses beyond vision to create meaningful experiences. To create such experiences in architecture, multisensory spaces must be created to make users feel like they are part of the space, which can be referred to an immersive experience. The friction between key personnel in the AEC industry, such as architects and engineers, are rooted in conflict between form, function, and physics. If there is a better understanding of structure and physics during the design process, it would reduce the conversations related to feasibility because there are calculations to support the design idea. In the last decade, new approaches such as BIM, virtual reality, and game engines entered the industry in order to solve these problems. BIM, also known as Building Information Models, is a 3D virtual representation of designs that manages and analyzes physical and functional properties of designs. Although BIM technology does not address the aforementioned problems in architecture, it is an effective design tool in the AEC industry that enables interdisciplinary collaboration. In many situations, the client of a project is not an architect or engineer, which means they do not always understand the orthographic drawings. This led to VR demonstrations in architectural workplaces. However, the flaw with VR is that when clients put on the VR goggles, there is an automatic disconnect in communication between the client, designer, and proposed design, creating a one-sided experience. Furthermore, a rendered image made into a VR experience lacks details such as people, vehicles, weather, and interactive elements that are not conveyed in real time. Game engines are the software platforms that underlie all games. In architecture designs, it has the potential to create interactive elements, aiding an iterative design process and presentation of design proposals. Although some architecture firms explore the use of game engines in their architecture workflow, only one group within the AEC industry has made the game engines an asset in their design process: the theme entertainment industry. To better understand how to design meaningful architecture and how to showcase projects authentically, we can turn to the design principles and workflow of the theme entertainment industry. Today, I'll be touching upon storytelling, multisensory spaces, accessibility, and new technologies in theme parks. A theme park revolves around a story, creating an emotional experience. The design of theme parks involves many moving parts working together in harmony. Similar to books and films, the guest is the reader experiencing the story, or the camera capturing the set. Theme parks are arguably the most immersive experiences that take into consideration all 5 senses in the design process. For the 5 senses, I would like to provide one example of how Disney stimulates the senses in order to enhance guest experience. First is sight. Disney's Cinderella Castle and the building on Main Street are designed in a way where the bricks gradually get smaller towards the top and the colors get lighter, creating an illusion that is taller than it truly is. Second is smell. Disney's Magic Kingdom Main Street smells of popcorn in front of the theater, and cookie dough scents is spread in front of the bakery shop, psychologically triggering a sense of place to guests. Third is music and sound, which is most predominantly used in Disney's Animal Kingdom, where bird noises echoes throughout the park to mimic wildlife ambiance. These familiar sounds subconsciously contribute to a more immersive and authentic experience. Fourth is the sense of touch, where the details are immaculately designed into the smallest of details, such as doorknobs on Main Street and the haunted house, telling the tale of its history and time. Lastly is a sense of taste. The diversity of taste can be found in Disney's Epcot, where Disney's can travel around the world to 11 countries and taste different cuisines offered by kiosks and restaurants directly inspired by the various countries. By addressing all 5 senses, it is evident when they all work together in harmony, it creates a strong sense of place that is convincing and immersive for all guests. In an industry that revolves around guest experience, it is important to create spaces for those with mobility, hearing, visual, and cognitive impairments. Rather than designing so that people have equal and the same experience, accessible design means to be designed for inclusivity. By striving towards a universal design, it creates inclusive spaces and experiences that everyone can enjoy and engage with. Disney's Imagineers were always one step ahead of the curve when it came to embracing new technologies. This includes utilizing flight simulators, KUKA robot arms, and elevator technology as a ride vehicle to enhance the story of a ride. While Disney's Imagineers are always striving to integrate new technologies, many older and existing technologies are reimagined to enhance guest sensory experiences. To create meaningful experiences throughout architecture, we must learn from theme parks, beginning with understanding storytelling, multisensory experiences, and adapting to the digital tools in their design process. So how can we borrow the ideas and design principles of themed entertainment into architecture? The second part of this presentation will focus on the game proposal idea, showcasing an interactive demonstration for clients and potential homebuyers to understand the space and experience a sense of home. More specifically, the game proposal will be adapted to residential architecture and its challenges. Within the game, each player must input their height, skin color, step distance, and accessibility considerations. Optional features include changing facial features, hair, and clothing to reflect the player in real life. To navigate around the game, the classic WASD and arrow keys are used to move the player around the space. The player can also left-click to select, right-click to bring up object properties, move their mouse to pan the scene, mouse scroll to zoom in and out the viewport, and press the spacebar to jump. The game will also have multiple game options that allow the player to experience the game as they prefer. First is a one-player versus multiplayer option, where the game can be played solo or with other players to mimic situations such as living with a spouse, family, or even having a party. Second is a manual versus guided walkthrough, where the former is where the player can freely walk around and the latter is predetermined routes that follow a specific purpose and routine, such as working from home, cooking in the kitchen, or hosting a party. Third is the ability to self-decorate or choose between pre-existing interior decorating schemes, allowing for the player to choose to be creative or view inspiration for their space. Lastly is the option to have full control versus guided, where full control can defy the laws of physics, and guided mode follows the laws of physics. For instance, guided mode would prevent the player from being able to stack a dresser on top of a vase, because each object has a mass associated with it, whereas guided mode would have an error pop up. Within the game, there are multisensory interactions that provide the player with a sense of place, specific to the project. For instance, the weather and seasons can be toggled. The ambience of noise, such as crowds, neighbors, music, and mundane noises such as sirens can be customized as well. Being able to have a multisensory experience for homebuyers enables them to fully understand the space. As I mentioned previously, this game proposal can be applied to design iteration stages as well, to provide designers and clients with a better understanding of the project as it's being designed. So what would integrating game engines into the architecture workflow look like? And more importantly, how much would it cost? Well, the leading game engine developed by Epic Games, Unreal Engine, is available for free for anyone to use. The founder and CEO of Epic Games, Tim Sweeney, decided to make Unreal Engine free for everyone to eliminate financial barriers and encourage people to fulfill their creative visions and shape the future. Users can also easily import existing 3D models from their softwares into game engines. The user must then set the physics parameters such as collision detection and gravity in order to begin gamifying the scene. The cost of integrating game engines in the architecture workflow falls not in the cost of the software itself, but rather in the cost of expertise and skill to utilize the software. One of the biggest obstacles in learning game engines as an architectural designer is coding. However, there are many plugins and extensions that are compatible with game engines that don't require users to have any prior knowledge in coding. For instance, Playmaker is a visual scripting tool that allows visual learners to code without any prior coding experience. A similar interface to this coding tool in the architecture industry is Grasshopper, a parametric coding tool that computes parametric designs in 3D software. So to conclude, by first outlining the gaps and deficiencies present in today's architecture workflow, followed by exploring the design elements present in today's themed entertainment industry, parallels can be drawn between theme parks and architectural design to improve design workflow. When analyzing theme park design, it is evident that when storytelling, multisensory design, accessibility, new technologies are equally prioritized, the blur between reality and fantasy are inseparable, creating a magical guest experience. When the same design principles and tools are integrated in the architecture workflow, it has the potential to create human-centered designs that evoke meaningful experiences. The gaming world is not merely just for gamers anymore. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm here to talk to you today about gamification merged with the fintech industry. The title of my thesis is Using Gamification to Influence User Success in Personal Finance Apps. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the research I did and then what I created with that research. Before I begin, a quick introduction on me. My name is Carrie Hayes. I'm an educator and UX designer. I've spent 20 years as a product designer and 13 years as an educator. And most of my work is dedicated to creating frictionless digital and analog experiences for customers. So I wanted to bring a little bit of context to my project for you. I decided in my project to tackle inequality, and so I've got some stats for you. One of the most shocking is during the pandemic, Canada's richest 44 people got $53 billion wealthier. Meanwhile, Canada's unemployment rate increased from 5.6% to 9.7%. And another fun stat for you about Canada, maybe not fun, but something that brings awareness, is that the median household now needs 60 months of savings for a minimum down payment on a house. But if you're looking in a city like Toronto or Vancouver, you need as much as 34 years of savings to earn your down payment for your house. So inequality is growing. It's definitely an issue, and it's leaving a lot of Canadians feeling discouraged and disempowered. So what I wanted to do was explore how the principles of gamification can make a difference for consumers by increasing their motivation within and engagement with financial literacy focused smartphone apps. And I chose to focus on budgeting apps. And the whole idea was not to solve inequality, but to help consumers feel a greater sense of personal agency. So my thesis was that personal finance apps that are currently on the market, so budgeting apps, could be doing a better job of engaging and building motivation for consumers. And I posited that incorporating gamification techniques might make those apps more engaging and compel users to use them more often. So I won't bore you with a lot of these details, but a bit of background on financial literacy. Financial literacy education has been informal throughout much of human history. So in other words, most financial education is passed down from parents to children. There aren't many formal avenues for becoming more financially literate. In this research, I also did a market survey and I looked at 61 apps and chose 5 that I would do an in-depth analysis on. And what I noticed in general is that budgeting apps either had a forward or rear-facing outlook for consumers. So take the example of Mint. Mint is a personal finance budgeting app here in Canada. And what Mint does is it collects all the data you put in as you enter transactions, and it tells you what you spent last month or the month before that. So it's what I call a rear-facing outlook. It doesn't give consumers much information or agency because it's just telling you about your past successes or failures. It's not telling you what you can do in the future, and it's not helping you to make those plans. 2 of those apps I reviewed had forward-facing outlooks, which means that you planned your finances out into the future in these apps, and that actually gave you some sense of personal agency because you had the ability to meaningfully change your financial outcomes. The 2 apps that did that are YNAB and EveryDollar. The other major feature I noticed in terms of gamification were that budgets had, these budgeting apps had budgets and progress bars, what I call a reverse progress bar. So what would happen is the progress bar would draw down as you spent money each month. And these apps also had good data visualization. So those were all really big positives, but I felt that these budgeting apps could do more. So here were some of my recommendations. I wanted to create a simple, intuitive onboarding deck to make things more accessible. I wanted to embed a formal skills building path into a budgeting app and make it widely available through Google Play and the Apple App Store. And I wanted to use gamification to implement motivational affordances that help users overcome cognitive biases. And a quick primer on cognitive biases. Psychologists know that we don't always make financial decisions that are in our own best interest. And the reason are cognitive biases, and it's these 5 things. I won't go into those in detail, but you can probably guess from the title of these what some of them refer to. For example, discounting the future means we tend to place more emphasis or tend to prioritize things in the near future and punt or put aside things that are in the distant future, like saving for retirement. And so we tend to make decisions that run counter to our best interests. So I employed gamification in my project, and my approach was to create simple, intuitive onboarding, embed a formal skills building path, and implement motivational affordances. And when I had done all of that, I had created an app, a budgeting app called Money, a gamified mobile budgeting app. And this is a working app that was created using no-code techniques. I just didn't want to demonstrate it here on the screen because it's a little bit slow as it's running the demo. So I thought I would just bring you screen captures, but the app does work. So here's the user flow for the onboarding. It takes a linear narrative form, and it walks the users through the basic setup of a budget and the first 4 of 17 Finlet skills. So some of the gamification techniques I used were anthropomorphism. So I used a human voice here to encourage the user. I embedded what Yu Kai-Chu calls epic meaning. So I gave this a broader narrative and I brought in this idea of life energy, which, interesting story, comes from a book by Vicki Robin called Your Money or Your Life. She is the woman that sparked the FIRE movement. And FIRE is a financial movement that stands for, FIRE stands for Financial Independence Retire Early. So it's a group of people that save up to 70% of their income so that they can retire by 30 or 35. It's what's called the FIRE movement. So epic meaning in this app brings in that FIRE movement and it introduces it to users to get them excited about what's possible when you're budgeting and managing your finances. Here, I also employ the fear of missing out. So I paint the picture of what the user's life could look like if they decided to use this app. And so by seeing that, it sort of reframes the value of the app in the user's mind. And they have this FOMO. If they quit now, they may not realize all of these dreams that are being painted. In onboarding, I also made use of evolved UI. So I used like a card deck swiper, also known as a Tinder swiper, to help users prioritize various financial goals and dreams. And I also used extreme personalization. So by the end of this onboarding deck, the consumer or the user has created a budget for themselves that's highly customized and very specific to their individual situation. Okay, so the second major upgrade I made to budgeting apps is to introduce a skills section. So think of this as a choose your own adventure through financial literacy. Users are presented with a narrative that contains an abundance of choice, and you can kind of see that here in the user flow with all of the different buttons. So some of the gamification techniques I employed here were milestone unlocks. So there are 17 skills, which you can see listed on the left-hand side there, but they only get unlocked as the user completes each challenge. So it's what we call adaptive release. So each new challenge is earned by the user. I also employed beginner's luck. So by the time the user goes through that Tinder card swiper in the onboarding, they've already completed the first 4 skills. And my research shows that when you give users beginner's luck, they're much more likely to push through the harder things later on because they feel those easy early wins in the app. I've also employed the gamification technique of mentorship. So in it, on the right, you can see a video I created. Obviously, if I publish this, it may not be me speaking in the video, but there's kind of a personal voice introducing each skill and kind of encouraging the user as they go along. I'm going to skip past this just so I can talk about the last piece, which is rewards. So I've called it progress in my app. So I've introduced exchangeable points. So each time the user completes a skills challenge, they receive either a seedling or sun and water points. And that all goes here, where the user is collecting a set of seedlings that they can evolve or grow into larger and larger plants. The hope here is to create a sunk cost prison for the user where they feel like they have too much invested to really quit the app. You can see the sun and water points at the top, and the user can apply that to evolving or growing each one of their seedlings, and they grow into fun, beautiful, intricate things as you go along. Last thing I want to point out is our wealth at the bottom. So the idea here is to help consumers feel a sense of personal agency against inequality. No, this app is not going to solve that problem, but the Our Wealth number shows the combined net worth of everyone who's playing this app globally. So you can see that that kind of adds up when you have people collected in numbers, and it makes you kind of feel like, yeah, you know what, together we've got a lot of money and we're making this happen. So I won't go into too many more details, but that is my app in a nutshell. So thanks for listening, everyone.
Hi everyone, welcome to this year's Industry Showcase, virtual of course. My name is Torsam. I'm happy to be part of this amazing MDM 8.0 cohort. I'm excited to be talking about my research, so let's get started. So my research project is aimed at exploring ways that the power of video games has been harnessed for different fields other than commercial profits and used as an effective empathy building tool. Studies have found that story-driven video games to have an impact on human emotions and can be used as tools to encourage social change. The nonprofit sector, however, relies on digital storytelling campaigns to raise awareness, engage with audiences. But by being slow in embracing the possibilities offered by new media technologies, especially narrative video games, the sector has lagged in adopting the fastest growing media platform in the world. I actually wanted to start off this presentation with a story and how I got inspiration for this project. Well, it actually started in 2012 when I did my undergrad in business. But instead of joining the corporate world, I decided to volunteer for the United Nations during the worst flood crisis in South Asia. While working in the field in the communications and reporting team, me and my colleagues were constantly trying to come up with communication materials to teach people in rural areas about the impacts of climate change and disaster risk reduction. But it wasn't having the same response as we expected. Nobody cared or read manuals or paid attention to adverts. At the same time, I decided to try something completely unique, and I came up with this idea of changing or integrating key messaging to a popular board game that is played everywhere. And so that children and adults can learn and play at the same time. It was called the Indus River game. And also designed a comic book, Rafa the Rat, and it had an instant impact. Kids loved the comic book because they felt bad for this rat who had lost his entire home because of the actions of some humans, and there I knew the potential of these games. So the question is, why video games? Well, why not? Statistics show that video game industry has expanded tremendously over the years and have become an integral part of Americans' lives, surpassing other entertainment like music and films. Developer industry experts are starting to realize the potential of video games because it is a unique medium, and so they can play a pivotal role in raising awareness about global pressing issues. It presents several advantages, including retention and memorization. They are different than traditional online media because video games provide a virtual environment that stimulates creative emotions, encourages audiences to explore, inquire, and use multiple senses. And another question I got during this research is, why focus on empathy? Empathy is found to be the foundation of social action and activism. Empathy is a far better way to educate audiences about societal issues like mental health, poverty, addiction, etc. Experts say that we need an empathy revolution and state that it is the most important skill for business and world leaders today. During this process, I researched game principles and game mechanics that focus on triggering human emotions to build empathy, as well as playing a lot of commercial and indie video games. As part of my content analysis, I developed a first-person exploration video game prototype in the Unity 3D game engine. And the idea behind the story came from my research about the global mental health crisis, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. Canadian Mental Health Association says that 1 in 5 people in Canada will personally experience a mental health problem, and study shows that death of a loved one is one of the most stressful events. So taking inspiration from various blogs and stories by people struggling with depression, a fictional story was created to address mental health and post-traumatic stress that is caused after losing a loved one. Players can discover for themselves the need for spreading awareness about mental health. So now is the time I show you the game trailer and some gameplay footage. So hope you like them.
I've been walking through life aimlessly, pursuing closure but not knowing where to look for it. I guess that's how I found myself here after so long. The loss of a child can do that to you, you know? Leave you stranded and lost. It's been a while since my girl left this world, but still, I sometimes feel as though it was only yesterday. The memories are fresh in my mind, and I hope that coming here can help me let go of some of them. I know I need to move on, but I don't know how. Bag would never be in the right place. She'd often throw it on the floor, hurried feet running to embrace me. Each time I got home, it was the same. Oh, I miss those little arms around me now. Wish I could hold her one more time. Books were her everything, and she'd get lost between their pages, exploring the depths of the world through her collection of tales. She sometimes said she'd like to write her own stories. So why she cut her own one short? Why'd she leave us the way she did? I've been wondering this every day since. She sought reprieve in this treehouse that we built together with our hands. It had its many flaws, I knew that, but not to her. To her, it was perfect. Her own castle out of a fairy tale. A place to call her own.
While more research needs to be done on the notion of empathy within a gaming context, it is hoped that this paper can inspire researchers, designers, and decision makers in the nonprofit sector to more closely examine the power of interactive experiences to engage with audiences. And so with that is the end of my presentation. The game will officially launch on itch.io and Steam later next month. Please visit the website www.nevergoongame.com for development updates. If you have any questions, please post them in the chat, and we hope to answer them in the panel discussion. So stick around for the panel discussion and the rest of the presentations. Thank you for your time.
Hi everyone, my name is Lillian and I'd like to share with you my major research project, Cozy Games and Character-Driven Story Worlds, Effective Tools for Pediatric Voice Therapy. In order to understand voice therapy, we first have to look at the broader field of speech-language pathology. Speech-language pathology can be loosely divided into three main areas of focus. First, there's language, which looks at problems understanding words or sentences. Then you have speech therapy, which focuses on problems articulating or stuttering. And then finally, you have voice therapy, which focuses on problems in one's vocal cords, causing issues like hoarseness or vocal strain. It's this last therapy that we're targeting for our project. Because voice disorders make up the smallest percentage of SLP disorders in these three focuses, voice therapists have much fewer media resources available to them than SLPs that focus on language or speech therapy. When it comes to serious games, that is, games for educational purposes, very few are made for SLPs. A 2013 report surveyed over 100 serious games for health and showed that less than 1% were speech therapy related. And of that, voice therapy is even smaller. So what do current therapy games look like? Well, we were only able to find a few. This one is from Pentex Medical, and it's called Visipitch. And as you can see from the brochure on the left, it's quite clinical or medical in its appearance. And on the right, you can see it's quite outdated in its graphics and user interface. Here's another voice therapy game called Dr. Speech. While this one is consumer facing and available online, the visuals are again not as appealing or interesting as they could be, and the game mechanic is very basic. There's also apps for voice therapists, but most of them are for adults and they're not gamified. And if you look at the online resources, like the SLP solution, they are age-appropriate materials, but mostly limited to printable handouts or links to external videos. With all voice therapy games we surveyed, we noticed a lack of compelling, character-driven story worlds, which has been shown to help increase motivation and engagement in learning. With this knowledge in mind, we asked our first research question. How can we use character-driven story worlds to improve adherence and engagement in pediatric voice therapy games? To ask our next research question, we explored the burgeoning concept of a cozy game. Project Horseshoe, an industry think tank of game experts, recently released a report recognizing an emerging trend of cozy games in the game industry. At its core, the definition of a cozy game is a game which evokes a sense of safety, abundance, and softness. Safety refers to a feeling of psychological safety. Cozy games are often exploratory in nature, involving simple, almost mundane tasks to complete without time constraints, urgency, or fear of failure. Abundance in cozy games refers to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which comprises of a 5-tier pyramid of all human needs. When base needs like food and shelter are met, players can focus on higher order needs like mastery, self-reflection, and connectedness. While many game genres focus on motivations related to survival, like avoiding starvation or trying not to be killed, cozy games focus on needs at the top of the pyramid, giving players space to deal with emotional maintenance and growth. Softness in cozy games refers to sensory signals that create security. This includes the use of warm colors, natural materials, ambient noise that is nature-based or human-centric, and often slow transitions like cross dissolves rather than abrupt cuts. So, what's a good example of a cozy game? Let's talk about Animal Crossing: New Horizons, which in the last year has sold over 35 million copies globally and currently sits as the second best-selling Nintendo Switch title to date. Animal Crossing is a non-competitive, open-ended social simulator game. Players live on an island where you can coexist with non-player animal residents. Players can swim, fish, pick fruit, collect bugs, and customize the island with new homes and buildings. There are no time constraints, no sense of urgency, you never run out of resources, and you always feel safe. Animal Crossing uses warm tones, soft lighting, natural ambient noise to create a relaxing environment, all aspects of a cozy game. Other recent examples of cozy games include Stardew Valley, Cozy Grove, and Alba Wildlife Adventure. Maybe you've been playing some of these during the COVID pandemic. This only represents a small handful of cozy games, but an ever-increasing number are being released, mainly from independent developers, but some mainstream titles as well. We can also see cozy games within the app space. One particularly cozy app is called Luna, which provides an interactive coloring story called Sleepscapes that users can perform before bedtime to help relax the mind and prepare for sleep. So our second research question is, how can coziness be applied to pediatric voice therapy games? Coziness enables feelings of psychological safety, which is important for vocal health, and coziness can complement indirect therapies for the voice, including mindfulness and self-regulation. So, where did we begin with our game design? Well, first, I worked with a domain expert, a clinical SLP called Timothy Poon, who helped me understand the ins and outs of voice therapy. Here's a video of Timothy teaching me some of the voice therapy techniques that he would use with a child patient. Through our sessions, I was able to break down the direct and indirect treatment options that are used for voice therapy. Of particular interest is this direct therapy in pink called semi-occluded vocal tract exercises, or SOVT for short, which uses simple tactile objects like straws, cups, tissue paper to improve voice resonance. These exercises seem quite appropriate for children, and so we decided to convert that into our game. Our idea is to create a game where children would be trainers like Pokemon who hone their skills using SOVTs in order to befriend interesting creatures in the AR space. We would also create a physical kit where all the necessary tactile objects and exercise instructions could be placed. This is our game design map. We would first create a user journey to understand the patient and the parent, followed by building the story world, moving on to create a physical trainer kit, and finally an app to pair with the physical kit. We had to identify the 7 main SOVTs, which are these ones in gray. And within each SOVT were 4 progressive steps, each step more challenging than the one preceding it. In this way, patients achieve success with the SOVT in stages, allowing for incremental milestones and rewards to be gained throughout the process. This breakdown also represents the number of creatures that would be needed for our game, 1 for each SOVT step. We created an environment map and placed each family of SOVT creatures in a particular geographical location. Each region matched the nature of the exercise and would also influence the aesthetic design of the characters. Then I collaborated with my 7-year-old son, who has a keen interest in Pokemon and naming taxonomies, to come up with the names and visuals for the creatures. Each set of creatures had similar characteristics, indicating that they were part of a family or species. I converted those into my own drawings, so these are my sketches of the SOVT creatures. And then here are my final designs. You can see I kept the color palette similar within each family of exercises. And here's the characters all fit into the world map. We decided to call the game Tomovox. Tomo means friend in Japanese, and Vox is Latin for voice. Now that we've established a story world and characters, we move on to creating the physical toolkit, which will contain all the necessary objects, as well as materials needed to help the patient practice their exercises. We started with Tomo cards, which you can see here. Each card has 1 Tomo character, which can be called by practicing SOVT exercise. This is the Us family, which represents a tissue exercise. And here's a Strawley family, which represents a straw phonation exercise. I did a bunch of designs, and in total there were 28 characters. And this is the way they looked. The final designs were printed on cardstock to create a set for the prototype kit. Then I made a Tomo journal where patients could insert the creature cards and track the progress of their training. Patients can use the journal to name their creature, add personal details. There's also a space where the clinician can add his notes and where the patient can track their SOVT progress, using stickers as rewards for every time they practice. Each Tomo card came in an activity envelope that would contain an instruction card plus stickers to use for tracking. We also added a breathing tool in the kit, which serves as a visual aid to help patients with their diaphragmatic breathing. This is a 2D version of what's called a hobosphere, and it was created using cardboard and brads. Lastly, I wanted the box itself to be incorporated into the game design. So we added a world map to the inside of the box and where the Tomo stickers could be placed. This way, the patient could see the Tomo creatures they befriended every time they opened the box. The box was designed using Adobe Illustrator and printed at the Ryerson Creative Technology Lab. So this is the final Tomovox prototype, complete with the Tomo creature journal, the breathing aid, tactile objects, and finally an activity kit that contained the Tomo card, stickers, and instructions. Lastly, we tested the idea of adding AR interactivity to the game by utilizing the Tomo cards as image targets. This demo was made using Adobe Aero and animation in After Effects and Photoshop. So the conclusion of my MRP is a fully realized prototype that's ready for user testing and further development. Thanks so much for listening and being here.
All right, so my name's Lexi, and my research is on the gamification of online dating. So let's just dive right into this because 10 minutes is going to go by fast. So in 2019, I went through a really, really bad breakup. I was not coping too well, and in a fit of sadness and rage, I just downloaded a few dating apps. And by a few, I mean 35. Approximately. It's probably more like 45 because there were some indie ones I couldn't screenshot here. And yeah, so after that experience, I decided to focus my MRP research on the UX, UI design of the apps themselves. So my research specifically examines gamification and how apps like Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge, which are the three apps, Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, that I'll be focusing on for my research. So I've been studying over the past 8 months the mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics frameworks. So how these dating apps impact user perception and gamify experiences. So what is gamification? So the term gamification was coined by Nick Pelling in 2002, and it became widespread in about 2010. So one of the most used definitions of gamification is the use of game design elements in a non-game context. So obviously, gaming is not dating, is not a game context. So there is this little rewards hierarchy, which if you are familiar with gamification, or even if you're not, this is kind of the way it is structured. So stuff to status. Monetary rewards is kind of in the stuff section. Power is like the ability to vote. Moderator status. Access is like previews, first to know, and then status is like VIP perks, points, badges, etc. So this chart is kind of how I analyzed a bunch of the dating apps I was studying. So what kind of stuff they give you, what access do they give you, etc., etc. And actually, when it comes to dating apps, the bottom tier classification is a very good tool at acquiring new users. So oftentimes marketing for dating apps will offer free trial periods, the chance to get otherwise paid for content for free, and that hooks the user in right away. But one thing I really want to focus on for this presentation is actually the psychology of dating, because when I started this research, I started looking at the psychology of dating. So fun fact, dating app designers are working hard to make you feel addicted. They want you to use the app. They want you to have the experience of playing, as I like to call it, the game of love. So the addictive qualities of gamified applications like Tinder or Hinge are actually neurochemical in origin. So playing games on your phone releases endorphins in your body, and it makes you feel happy. So if your app, your dating app like Tinder, is constantly showering you with badges, with rewards or offers, you're going to have a higher serotonin in your body, and you're going to want to keep playing. So one thing that I actually studied was behavioral psychology, also known as operant conditioning, big word. So that brings you back into the dating app. It's this feel-good response of wanting to be reinforced. Tinder actually does a really great job of this if you've ever used Tinder. And I would love to get into kind of what the app interfaces look at, but like because I've studied them, there's too many. I don't have the time. But Tinder is really good. If you're off Tinder for a while, it will say you have new notifications waiting for you. You have new matches. It'll like give you these little heart emojis to make it feel like really addictive. You want to go back and see what you're missing at. So yeah, dating sites are in the business of keeping you swiping. Okay, that's a huge thing I looked at. It's actually called the infinite swipe. It is the notion of just swiping through. Your brain isn't really focusing. You're not processing what you're seeing. You are just swiping and becoming addicted to the rewards that the app is offering you. However, are you actually going to make connections and date people? Probably not. And my research would actually argue that you're not going to. So the challenge becomes, how do I combine dating apps and gamification to actually use it in a positive way without this addictive gambling-like reward, this dopamine rush that gamification is actually doing? So Tinder is a really great app to look at the negative effects of swiping. The term is actually called Tindering, and that was loosely coined in about 2017. Tindering is viewed as the habit of swiping and just continually getting that reward for you. There was actually a study that was conducted in 1948 that involved feeding pigeons in a cage at random time intervals with a fake button, and the pigeons were tricked to believe that pressing the fake button would give them food. So following this, although Tinder doesn't use pigeons, this example is helpful in really illustrating how different interactions can elicit different outcomes. So along with Tinder, I also studied Hinge. So Hinge seems to be taking a different approach on gamification. And actually has positioned itself to get rid of the swiping. So their slogan is designed to be deleted. They actually don't want you on the app. And their scroll mechanism is very different. the scroll of Hinge is actually a forward swipe motion as opposed to left and right, which is actually something to be interested in because you have more time to focus when you're scrolling down than if you're scrolling left and right. As far as mechanics, because I did study mechanics, aesthetics, and dynamics, mechanics is the system and like what you're actually doing. Aesthetics is the appearance, and dynamics is kind of behind the scenes stuff. So aesthetics of Hinge, very muted, different colors. Aesthetics of Tinder, really big. One of the big things to recognize here is that online dating is complicated and its users are induced to spend more time on the apps without making real connections. Tinder is all about fiery red colors, keeping you engaged, keeping you on the app. But what about actually dating? Isn't that why people want to be on these apps? This is just a little preview of Hinge. These aren't real people. This is fake, by the way, just in case you know any of them. They're all fake. This is an example of Hinge. So Tinder focuses on appearances, personalities, actually appearances first and foremost. Hinge focuses on stories. So they're taking obviously very different approaches, and then Bumble focuses on both. And actually Bumble has been coined the feminist dating app because women actually have to message first, although if we're getting a little bit into I've studied a little bit about gender too throughout this process, and there are different rules and algorithms depending on what gender you sign up with, but I won't be talking about that here. So my key findings have been that dating apps have addictive qualities. Most people eventually want serious relationships when they're using these apps, but they also don't want to be doing this in public. It's a private thing done at home. You don't want to be seen swiping in public. So what have I done? So I have created a dating app called Datrix. Datrix is an app that arises from the specific pain point of dating that many apps like Tinder focus on gamified strategies that make the apps more addicting, but actually give you less access to people who are clear about what they want in their relationship. Here's just, I can't show my prototype because I'm currently in the process of making it usable, but here is just a little inspiration for you. So I was inspired by Tetris, hence the name Datrix. So in Tetris, you're kind of putting pieces together, trying to make them fit. The idea of dating, trying to fit with someone, I just thought it was kind of cute. So in my app, I'll get into a little bit about what it is, just so you guys kind of know what I'm working on and what you can expect to see. So dating apps, my app actually, the solution that I'm offering is no more swiping. A virtual scroll, I'm going to do exactly what Hinge is doing, but I'm also going to offer date ideas for people to open up the doors to actually getting these things scheduled. So I don't really want to give too much away, but my app is kind of like a puzzle. You won't know what you're getting into until you try it. And I don't want to say too much, but yeah. So the implications of dating, Hinge, Tinder, and Bumble offer really unique perspectives. My app is going to kind of take those perspectives and blend them all into something that hopefully people haven't seen before. And yeah, one thing I also want to mention too is that I'm not one of those people who wants to create an app focused on appearances. I'm focused on connection, getting people to talk, first and foremost, getting them to just be involved with each other. And here's a little, if you guys want to follow me or check out my website. Also currently single and dating, so I don't know why I said that, but I feel like it was relevant to mention that on my social media I talk a lot about this research outside of my personal life. So yeah, that's my presentation.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tabitha Grant. I'm a professional working in education. And for the last 4 years, in education for the last 4 years. But over the last year, I've spent a lot of time trying to better understand if there was an opportunity to take the power of play and combine that with education to help develop resiliency and agency within students with mental health disorders. So the concept of play in games in education is nothing new or mind-blowing. Research on the subject dates back decades, and there's a lot of insights on the subject matter. Most people around my age, you probably lived through this era of math circus or leapfrog in our early youth. I can't really tell you what the intended purpose of this game was, but I do remember it being fun. So that often, I tend to question when discussing this topics why games stop being used after this primary age. I'm not saying that Math Circus was the best example of education or edutainment out there, but it does help us pose the question of why fun and play, which is very natural and arguably necessary part of human behavior, can't coexist in the education system at the later ages as we try to provide these accessible and safe means for growth and development of students. So nowadays in our highly advanced technical world, beyond the classroom, a number of incredible people in this space have made a lot of positive change using concepts of serious gaming and applying gamification principles to the world of education, or what we call game-based learning, where we develop game environments for learning. This can be digital, real, or tangible. So let's think about Khan Academy or Duolingo, their badge systems, their levels, and rewards. Or if we look at game-based learning, Minecraft for education and the way that they've created a game environment. So video games in general outside of the world of education has become somewhat of an important third place for many youth. It's a way for them to be expressive and outgoing in a virtual skin. Take Sims 4, for example. So with all of that in mind, now imagine the possibility if we're able to combine gamification of our real world with game-based learning in a way that was actually fun and exploratory, that makes youth want to learn and develop themselves. A game that guides them through the barriers of education and their personal self-doubt. In this space, we can use play and game mechanics to help students try things that they're too scared to try. We can open their mind to possibilities and teach them to endure things when things don't go according to plan. Rather than teaching them what to learn, we teach them how to learn by overcoming the hurdles. So recently I created Mukuru. It's a game inspired by African Caribbean folklore. In this game, Mukuru has been tasked with the mission to find the hidden spirits held captive by the enemy forces and release them back into the community in order to save their world, the Sheka Forest. The game combines real-world activity, where players are rewarded for challenging themselves by completing tasks that live outside of their comfort zone. Think about community service, class participation, or simply trying a new activity. Then, within game-based learning, students can take those rewards from their real-world action and apply them in a game where the storyline teaches them about resilience building and self-reflection. So if we think about our own community, in the GTA, 25% of at-risk youths are Black, many of which are exposed to environmental factors that deeply affect their mental wellness and create barriers to success and barriers to common milestones as simple as graduating high school. So representation in our game design is really important and it really matters. Mukuru, in his journey, will train all players of the game in discipline, confidence, curiosity, creativity, purpose, community building, self-identity, and self-worth, and hopefully the desire to learn and grow and develop beyond the barriers of mental health. So to close off, I have a short video on Mukuru and the gameplay elements of it. So thank you all for watching. I hope that if there's any educators on this call, you consider game-based learning and gamification in your teaching practices. Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is Jason, and my MRP is a systematic review on gamification in marketing. So, gamification implication in marketing has been regarded as one of the novel innovations in the past decade and has always thought to have a positive effect in generating customer engagement and loyalty. However, due to the highly situational dependent characteristic of different subsets in marketing, such as service marketing or product marketing, the knowledge generated in one subset is often not applicable to another. Therefore, this study sought to identify the effect of gamification, the practical implication of gamification in the industry, as well as to identify the necessary steps to a successful gamified service design. So as you can tell by the name, a systematic literature review methodology was employed in this study, and the Prisma framework was utilized to ensure transparency and rigor. Keywords such as gamification, marketing, and consumer, and their synonyms such as game, market, and customer were also used along with multiple logical operator to search for a wide range of studies. Furthermore, discipline filter were limited to business and economic, and a subject term were limited to both business and marketing. During the initial sampling search on June 22nd, 2021, there's a total of 311 articles that are identified on the database for further review. However, I was unable to access 27 articles, and there's 232 studies that were excluded for irrelevancy. 14 articles have the wrong setting, such as selection bias and the lack of comprehensiveness. 10 articles have the wrong study design, for their findings cannot be replicated or contribute to our review. And an article with the wrong patient population for interviewing marketing manager instead of the customer. And that brings us to a total of 27 articles that were identified and included in the systematic literature review. There are a few phenomena that have emerged from the selected studies, and they made up different facets of gamification implication in marketing. Firstly, judging from the growing number of publication count, we can tell there's an uptrend in popularity. However, most studies concentrated in first world developed country, and it seems that developing countries have less interest in this topic. And that may be due to the fact that the majority of the studies were conducted in a digital environment, and those from first world developed country have more access to digital devices. Therefore, it seems there's a correlation between the country's economic scale and the popularity of gamification. Furthermore, since retail journals have the most interest in conducting gamification studies more than other journals, I would assume that the retail sector should be the beneficiary of gamification. However, from the findings, there is some evidence suggesting gamification does not necessarily have a positive effect on retail marketing, and thus they're not the beneficiary in of this concept. Furthermore, the findings of many of the empirical research can only support a particular subset in marketing. Therefore, low generalizability has been one of the common limitations in their studies. Moreover, although many pieces of research were based on a theory that the final goal of gamification in marketing is to increase engagement and loyalty. However, there's not a sufficient amount of research that has been contributed on this topic, And therefore, further expansion of theory is needed on the direct relationship between gamification and loyalty. Despite this undecipherable relationship, though, the majority of research yielding similar outcome. So it is reasonable to conclude that gamification does have a positive effect on marketing. Moreover, any gamified system can be considered a service and be examined by the service marketing theory. This is because the gamified experience itself is often already a service with a particular value co-creation process that is performed whenever there's an interaction between a game and a player. In this concept, each time the customer has any interaction with a brand, no matter it is a game or an advertisement, a value co-creation process is then performed. Although there are many definitions and interpretation of gamification in marketing across industry, we are able to build on service marketing theory and adopt a generalized definition that is applicable to a wide range of industry. In this definition, a gamified experience is constructed by a set of rules that aim to motivate customer engagement, increase brand perceived value, and enhance the customer loyalty. On the other hand, despite point and badge system is one of the most popular gamification implication in marketing, there are multiple evidence showing it doesn't work as intended to reinforce customer loyalty. This is because any kind of task-oriented activity will not have a positive effect on brand loyalty. And therefore, utilizing non-task-oriented activity will have a better result in reinforcing customer loyalty. This study concludes by proposing a framework developed from the findings in the literature and to demonstrate the psychological pathway that is still relatively unexplored in designing a successful gamified experience. So in this framework, firstly, a gamified experience will aim to provide enjoyment, motivation, and engagement to the customer. Next, a gender-specific target demographic is then selected with their own set of user engagement items, in which men are more favorable to challenges, completion, exploration, relaxation, and simulation, whereas women are more favorable to exploration, relaxation, discovery, completion, and fantasy. So these user engagement items will be used to evoke under the psychological state of absorption, concentration, and immersion. These psychological states will then be manifest in the characteristic of mastery, autonomy, flow, and suspense. According to Hamada and Wakabayashi in 2014, though, flow experience is the key here because it is heavily determining the final outcome, which is the favorable feeling towards a brand. Furthermore, the selected studies have suggested that there are multidimensional elements when designing a gamified surface, such as deep shallow continuum and incommensurate and commensurate elements. And after choosing a type of gamification to apply, the whole gamified experience will then be further divided into the core gameplay and the structured gameplay, and embedding itself into a cause and effect loop. This loop is often the core gameplay itself. Furthermore, one of the fundamental characteristics of gamification is that it is culturally dependent. This is because the value is co-created with the customer during the exchange of operand and operand resources, in which the operand resources are the resources that can be acted upon, such as gifts, commodity goods, or even cash prizes. They're often tangible, where operand resources are non-tangible, with examples such as knowledge, competency, intellectual property, or even just the simple good feeling. And therefore, the outcome may be, the gamification outcome may be subject to a large variability when there is a change in demographic. So these mapping, the mapping and the proposed framework in this study can support industry practitioners who are already adopting gamification in marketing practices, but are unclear as to what extent gamification could have affect marketing activities. This framework will also be aid gamified surface designer in providing guidelines and the structure of the gamified experience journey, and explaining the corresponding psychological factor, as well as to identify the vulnerability when implementing a gamified surface. It also identified the priority and the key consideration based on the scope of psychology, so that industry practitioners and future researchers can avoid diversifying limited time and financial resources into other direction. And this is all for today. I hope you guys enjoy it, and thank you very much.
What's up, gamification crew?
Hi, hello. What's going on?
Hello,
everyone.
So we have some. We actually already got a really cool Twitch question, which I think would be fun to address off the bat. Hey, because we just had such a very diverse presentation of obviously so many different forms of gamification. So let's let someone else take this. Maybe Braden, what's your take on this? Is there an industry gamification doesn't belong in?
That's a very interesting question for sure, and I think it's actually the matter of how can you change gamification to fit in every industry itself. I personally think that every industry can use some sort of gamified elements to, whether that means increase the motivation towards the business or to increase knowledge retention in places like education. It's just a matter of fact of finding the right gamified elements and gamification elements that fit in each industry. Because not all industry, I would say, connects with different elements. Certain individuals working in different realms will use gamification and connect with gamification elements in different ways. So it's just a matter of finding what kind of features fit in which industry.
I like it. Lillian, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I have been reading a lot about gamification as well, and it can kind of be a dirty word when you think of the addictive qualities of gamifying things. But what I've learned too is that there's a lot of positive motivators that can come out of gamifying something, and it's about being very judicious about where you use it and being very mindful of the ethics behind using that level of motivation to get people to do whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish.
Yes, I like that. For one of the questions that we had from you that came in for you, or I think at least applies to you, is was there any specific game that inspired your game?
Yeah, so there were a lot of games actually, to my surprise. I mean, so there's this thing between indie games and commercial games right now. So commercial video games has that element of fun, entertainment to it as well. So in my research, I talked about empathy and human connections through video games. Now, all of the video games, let's take like Assassin's Creed, even in this case, it has that human connection. It there is an element where it sparks human emotions, but the primary focus of that game is not empathy. It's purely entertainment. But there are like some indie video game studios that are purely working on video games that has one purpose, and that is to connect with people on a much more deeper level. For example, there's a game called, if you haven't played it, it's called that Dragon Cancer. It's critically acclaimed game right now, and it's about it was created by these two developers and who are dealing with the loss of their child due to cancer. And that game, you play as a spectator. You're not playing as a character. You're playing as a spectator, and you're just going with the flow, and you're just experiencing the journey of these characters. So I think. So those kind of indie games really inspired me. And when it comes to like the visuals of the game, I think it was a combination of like Zelda and Firewatch. So I took like inspiration from a lot of video games and just like mixed them together. So that was kind of the process.
It sounds really intense. I feel like one of the things with gamification, and going back to Lillian's point, because my research was very negative in terms of what gamification can do. And I'm just curious, like, does anyone have any thoughts on, like, throughout the research, like, where you wouldn't? Because we had the question, like, what is there an industry where it doesn't belong in? It can belong in any industry, but is there one you would avoid? I got the question, why would you want to gamify dating a lot in my research? What do you guys think about that? Gamifying personal relationships.
I think it kind of depends to like the degree it's done. If it's very invasive and stuff, and it feels kind of just like it's controlling you more than it is just like a fun game thing, then yeah, that's probably a bit of an issue, because also that kind of goes against what the gamification is probably being implemented for. But I think like, yeah, it's totally fair to have it implemented in like personal things, so long as it's done in like an ethical way and it's not like going against what people want, and it's like fair treatment and all that kind of stuff.
I like that.
Yeah,
Chris, that's a
because
great question.
I was really interested in Katie's research, because in her area, like I wouldn't have thought about using gamification or some kind of game aspects in like a transport area kind of industry, right? But I mean, she's done it, so I think it works in all of those areas.
Yeah, for me it was like interesting too, because I actually kind of shifted my research from transportation to city navigation.
Yeah.
So like a lot of my research was actually heavily based on a game called, you guys probably know about Pokemon Go. So like my research was heavily based on that, and like how people just kind of navigate within their local space with a game like that. So like my research kind of touched on like how do we persuade people to like do certain things using a game like Pokemon Go. Yeah, so that was kind of like what my research kind of came out as.
Hey, I love this question from Chris, so we're going to bring it up. Who is doing gamification the best right now, in your humble opinions?
I don't know. I think like as a person who still plays Pokemon Go, I think it's all right. It still feels
I would like to do a little plug for Skip the Dishes right now, because if you keep ordering Skip, you actually now get points to keep ordering more Skip, and it has been bad lately. Starbucks does the same thing.
Absolutely. Companies like that do reward points, like Starbucks or Skip the Dishes, same with Uber, and how you have a rating on your driver or as a customer self, right? Like those tiny aspects, you don't think about it, but that is gamification in a sense. So I'd say companies like that are kind of providing that personalized aspect of it by giving yourself a gamification rating, are doing some of the best jobs right now.
I like it. We also got a question too, and actually I'd be interested for all of you guys to kind of comment on this, but what software have you guys been using to actually make your games? And why? Why did you choose that? Let's start with Torsum.
So I used Unity 3D, and I also with Unity 3D I also used Blender, which is like a 3D modeling software. I used it because I remember that I did a project in our first semester, and it was just like my first experience of using the software, and it just kind of clicked. I won't say it's exactly Photoshop, but there are some similarities, especially with layers and all that stuff. But I was completely new to 3D, and I think YouTube saved me. So everything I learned on the softwares was just through YouTube and official documentation, and just using Discord channels to just ask questions, and I would just get answers from people on Discord. So I use Unity, and it's a great software. And with Unity, you have to learn, you have to do like a lot of C# coding. But there is a plugin with Unity. It's called Playmaker. It's a visual scripting tool. You don't have to code that much. So it means that your development time will just reduce in half if you use that plugin. So I use that as well.
Oh, Lillian, what did you use?
Oh, I used paper. I actually didn't really. I was learning with Torsum actually about using Unity, and I've worked in Unreal Engine. But for my game, it was very tactile, and so the only element that did have some digital interactivity was the augmented reality at the end, which I used prototyping software in Adobe Aero. I think eventually, if we did take it into the game space, it would be like Torsum said, some either Unreal or Unity, some kind of scripting engine like that.
Paper.
What about
Anyone
you,
else
Lexi?
wanna- Oh, okay, so I'm only in like the prototyping phase so far. So I've been using Figma and Adobe XD just for my wireframes because I actually don't know how to do what I want to do. I don't have quite the skill set yet to do it, but probably would use, I don't know. I'd get someone to do it for me is what I would do.
That's the best kind of software.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's also in the terms I know you guys if we all took I don't know who was in our iOS development class, but yeah, that was Lillian, Torsum, we were Braden.
Yep.
Making apps for iOS and Android. Not so fun. I'm going to pull up another question here that I think might be kind of interesting. So, what was the biggest challenge for you guys in your projects? Katie, maybe we'll start with you.
The biggest challenge, I think, for me would be like kind of taking my idea away from Pokemon Go because I was so invested in Pokemon Go and also play myself as well. It was like really difficult for me just like make something that was like a separate product from Pokemon Go. Like even now, it's like very similar. And also just like not being able to like talk to a lot of people about what their experience with city navigation is, especially in like COVID, just because of COVID and also other reasons as well. So that was kind of like another hurdle for me that I had to do. So I did have to like read a lot about what other people researched and like their results to kind of guide my own research. And that was kind of like one of my biggest challenges with my project.
I'm having that same issue. I feel like I'm trying to like reinvent. There's 1,500 more than that dating apps out there, and I'm sure that maybe kind of is something we all kind of struggled with. Perhaps is just how to be innovative and how to be something unique. But we all are. True. Torsum, any challenges for you?
I think the biggest challenge for me was the actual development of it, because I didn't want to just build a prototype. I actually wanted to make like a final product. Because just making a prototype, I mean, it wouldn't have the same impact. So it was just learning the software completely from scratch, doing a lot of like troubleshooting, and everything I did, it was just like, there's a traditional way of doing it, like coders how to do it, and then there's like a rock star version of doing it where you're just doing stuff, not knowing what's gonna happen and just making it work. So that was my way of doing things. So yeah, and just small details like adding music, sound effects, and the movements of the players, and even the voiceover. I mean, I'm not a writer, I'm not a good writer, but writing like script and I did it with a friend, and but things like that, it was a big challenge. The research part, I was like done with it pretty quickly in the program, but the development part took a lot of time.
Cool. Cool.
I think actually, like, if I can hop onto Torsum's thing real quick. I think that kind of reminds me a lot of too, because like mine is very much more like the proposal stage rather than the actual product. And so a lot of what Torsum's saying kind of reminds me of like one of the big things in gamification is trying to like convey information as simply as possible, as easy to understand, in a way that makes users just, they can look at it, they know what's going on, right? And so like with the script writing, you want to make sure that the words are easily understandable. You don't want to write like the hyperbolic assimilation of the quantum blah, blah, blah. You want to have something that's like simple English or simple language, right? You want to convey things in a meaningful and interesting way rather than being like, wow, look at my super cool idea. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
I think that's one of the things too, is trying to like, because gamification, I think it's simple in concept, but then to actually apply it to, it's kind of like, okay, there's so many different directions that this can go in, and so many different like ways to interpret it, especially because like we're all so different. Like it's not just video games, like we had music, we had dating, we have education. It's just insane.
Yeah. I feel like there's a common misconception too. People are like, oh, gamification, that's like making the video game, right? Easy peasy. But it's like, it's fundamentally a similar thing in that it's like engaging with user experience, but it's so drastically different that they're very much like two different schools of thought, right? When you kind of approach either or. So it's, yeah, there's a lot more that goes into it than just like, fun idea, let's make buttons and colors, wahoo,
Fun buttons and colors. I don't know if any of you guys looked into kind of like, I'm trying to think of for me, like colors was huge, like in terms of like actually and that kind of related to gamification, like what actually creates that psychological response that makes you want to use something. So I mean, a lot of you guys obviously looked at aesthetics because you obviously have beautiful projects that you're showing. But yeah, if anyone has any other comments on that, we have a bunch of questions here. Can we know about Braden, Niko's, and Katie's projects?
Yeah, I'll give it a quick spiel. So my project focused a lot on gamification and education and using game-based learning in serious educational games. So in my research, I came across the term digital native, and that term is used to describe the younger generations that are becoming more and more increasingly comfortable and immersed into these digital worlds and digital environments. And combined with that, we have all this technology at our fingertips. So I think in places like the classroom, we now have to be, we need to begin to see the need to combine these two, having these digital natives who are immersed in these technology worlds already at such a young age, and the technology that we have at our grasp in places like the classroom. And by combining those, that comes in the form of gamification. And by doing so, we can provide students with a better and more enjoyable experience where they will stay motivated and actually hopefully retain more knowledge in the long run. So my project itself really quickly just involved in making a prototype for a game that involves students doing a quiz, an interactive quiz, which would be about the previous week's material, and then the quiz would have points involved with it based on correct questions, which those points would then be the economic system for the rest of the game, which was a card-based combat game.
Very cool.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
That sounds intense. Niko.
It was a lot of fun.
So mine is more of like, it's gamification and a bit of digital storytelling, because as a little bit of like preface, there was a YouTube channel called Unis Honest that was around for a bit. Maybe people have heard about it, maybe they haven't, it's okay. But the main premise of the channel was it would only last for a year, and then the channel would be deleted, and it dealt a lot with like themes of time and impermanence and that kind of stuff. And so part of my paper is like addressing that, but the other part is project proposal. And so in that project proposal, it's kind of me shaping a similar kind of fun, engaging, like hopefully engaging user experience of kind of like looking at the themes of like time and impermanence, and like kind of as a result of that, like death, what does that mean? How do we understand it? And sort of looking at those kind of big topic ideas, I guess, and kind of trying to convey it in a way that kind of like makes people think about these themes, not just like, well, look at me, I have a big brain, I'm all academic and stuff, but more so just like, these are interesting themes, and these are not just like interesting themes that I think are interesting, even though I do, but also just stuff that like, they're very like human oriented, you know, it's very much like pointed in how we kind of understand things. And so it's kind of like getting people to think about time, the time they're spending, what like how meaningful interactions influence by time in digital media, because digital media and stuff. So kind of a whole mishmash of like, time's a cool concept, let's build a little bit of a game around it. So yeah,
Cool.
that's what I got cooking up.
Awesome. So my project, as I mentioned before, I kind of shifted from transportation to city navigation, and then that kind of led me into like persuasion and motivation, which was also the basis of my research. So like the main question I had for like myself was like, how do I motivate and persuade people to like go certain places or like do certain things within the city? So my project, or the product I made, is a lot based on how do I get people to like help and visit local small businesses, and what I can do, or like how I can use gamification to kind of incentivize that. So with my project, basically you'll like input your destination in Google Maps, and then along the way you find these like little puzzle pieces that you have to find. You have to like find a whole collection of them, and then that kind of ends up as like a little reward for you. And each month, or like whatever amount of time, there's like different small businesses that are highlighted, which will help the business and also the consumers just like find different like local or small businesses within the area. And then with those, they could have like different rewards for these different places, and it's kind of like a win-win situation for both the consumer and also the business.
Ooh. Fascinating. Guys, I like this question too. There's so many. Let me just talk forever on this, but let's go back to this statistic. We've all incorporated video game technologies into our work. Should this continue, given that 52% of Canadians identify as gamers?
Heck yeah, gamers rise up, let's go.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, 52%, we're above halfway.
Yeah, then might as well just continue for the rest, right?
Yeah. Anyone have any thoughts on that? I didn't know that. That seems like a very high number, actually, because I feel like, at least in the dating sector, for me, there's actually a trend to go against gamification. It's actually a very big trend in Europe to delete your dating apps and to get out and meet people in person. So I tried not to focus my research on Europe because it wasn't in support.
I think that actually kind of like brings up a maybe like interesting thought in terms of like how geography plays a role. Because like Europe's a lot smaller than like Canada, let alone Canada and the States. Like in Europe, it's a lot easier to just like walk around and go people. Cars aren't as big a thing. But like you look at Canada, you look at the United States, it's literally like they're like highways longer than like city border or like country borders in Europe and stuff, right? So because of how far things are just in general, like relative to each other here, it makes sense that there is like that big distinction, and like kind of draws upon why it's important to like consider like the environment as sort of like the medium you're kind of like proposing your gamification stuff in and all that kind of stuff, if that makes any sense.
No, I never actually thought about that. And I guess one thing is we're all like, to bring Braden's term back, like we're digital natives. Like we know how to use this technology. What about people who maybe don't? Like that's maybe a sector where gamification maybe wouldn't work as much, you know, or trying to find ways to take it out of that technology realm.
Yeah, and like you don't want to make people feel bad of just like not understanding how like gamification stuff works. So it's like, how can you cater, you know? How can you make things easy?
Yeah.
I also feel like gamification isn't really like, it doesn't really have to be digital, because like even, what's an example? Like if you go to like Starbucks, for example, or like a smaller business, sometimes they give you like a little stamp card where like the more you go, the more like it gives you like a prize at the end, and that's also gamification. So I don't feel like gamification gamification is kind of everywhere, like digital or like what's the word, non-digital, I guess. Yeah, so I feel like it's kind of everywhere. Like it doesn't really have to be digital. It doesn't really have to be like for people like us who know how to use technology.
I wonder if the more you're aware of gamification, whether it actually works against the gamification techniques. So, I mean, even me just being more aware through this process of how I'm being gamified by different companies makes me actually want to pull back on a lot of different things. So I don't know the statistics about there, but there must be something there.
I kind of
Torsten, you can
Yeah,
go.
go ahead.
No,
So
no, you go.
I kind of agree. I kind of agree with Lillian because the more apps I use which has these gamification elements, the more I just want to move away from them, because we have come to a point that we just want to introduce gamification to everything. We think that it is a great solution. People want to do it, but I did some research, and a lot of people actually don't want to have gamification. They just want to have like a good experience. That doesn't mean that they want gamification elements to it. So I mean, the research is a bit, it's a bit 50-50 on this.
I really like that because for me, like in my research, like some apps I've loved the gamification component and having rewards because I hate the prospect of having to make time to date. Like in a way, gamification makes it easy. It's like, oh yeah, my app's reminding me to go on this and actually talk to people, and like it kind of gets you out of that comfort zone. Which brings me actually to another question we have, which I think kind of ties into this. So the significance of motivation. So there's evidence to support that gamification works well when connecting to motivation in the workplace, which is why there's difficulty in successfully tossing gamification into traditional instruction. So what do we think about this? What's the significance of motivation in the context of gamification? Brayden or Lily?
I will jump in because I've been reading a lot about motivations, especially for children. You don't want to use you want to motivate in a positive way, and I was reading a lot from You Could Choose book Actionable Gamification, which identifies the idea of black hat and white hat motivations. So black hat motivations motivate you because you're scared of losing something. So for example, like if you don't check into this app, you're going to be really scared that you're going to miss out. But white hat motivations are things like narrative, meaning, accomplishment, or creativity or empowerment. And so I think that the type of motivation, and also he looks at extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, which I'm sure has come up in your research as well, and the idea that you want to instill more intrinsic motivation because it comes from within and continues to help you move even after the game's over. So I think that the type of motivation is really important, and to be able to frame what you're doing in a way where you can explain that and how that works within your game.
That was so eloquently said. I don't have any words. Beautiful. Gamifying, I like this comment that just came in. Gamifying tedious experiences. Anyone have any ideas on how we can gamify taxes?
I play a game for taxes. TurboTax is kind of like a game for taxes, isn't it?
Actually, it's true. TurboTax.
There is, not particularly taxes, but there is a startup in Toronto. It's called Fineo. They are doing something on that because I happen to know a few people, and they're trying to do something with that. You like insurance, like putting gamification aspects into insurance and taxes as well. I don't know if it's ever going to happen, like if they've done it now, but yeah, they are trying to do new things.
I like this comment too, that gamifying tasks that are boring can often make the task longer, because that's something I came across. If you gamify dating, you're on this app forever. You're trying to make this connection, whereas if you just go to a restaurant and talk to someone, you've already instantly done that without having to go through this reward system. What do we think about that? Does gamifying make things longer? Does it take, at least in terms of tasks that might be otherwise seen as boring?
It may make things longer, but I feel like what you said there with the rewarding aspect of it, or like the feedback aspect, is kind of where the positive benefits of it come out, right? Like, and that's how you want something in gamification to be successful, with the feedback and the positive reinforcement, I guess you could call it, is kind of like a major aspect of it being successful in a sense.
I wonder too how much that maybe like plays into sunken cost fallacy, where it's like it's very pro company and stuff, not very pro consumer, but it's kind of just like, I've spent all this time working up to this point doing my taxes in this fun gamified way. I'm going to swap now? No, it's going to be harder, right? And so it's very like, if you do it well, it's very anti-consumer in certain like situations and stuff. So it's kind of like, I guess, a bit of a give and take, and how deep you want to go into the gamification process, I guess.
Yeah, I really like that actually.
And there was, I also read that like these some of the companies they want to do gamification, but when they do like this audience surveys, they find out that the audiences don't even want like gamification. They just want to stick to like the old school like ways of doing things. So that's why like gamification is sometimes might not be the answer, but it also depends on your audience. For example, if you're getting to audience of like 60 to 70-year-olds, they might not want to find things really complicated. They're just familiar with the setup, they're just familiar with the platform, they just want to stick with that.
There's another question that kind of came in that says rewards. What kind of motivational rewards could exist in dating? And I guess this is more targeted towards me. But so, like for me, the reward is a date. You've gone on the date, you've met the person. So my app, I'm trying to integrate an API where you basically have to set up a time and a place, and it goes right into your calendar. So the date is set for you, so that you can skip the whole talking for 6 months, ghosting, setup. But I think rewards in general can be very different. It depends on what the person's looking for too, right? Like rewards for a dating app, getting a date might be the reward for someone, but maybe someone doesn't want a date. There's people don't use dating apps just to date. So it's definitely something that I think is contextual in nature.
Also, I mean, we have to know the difference between like gaming and gamification. When we talk about gamification, we think of, oh, it's a game, but it's not a game. It has these aspects of game that are integrated into these platforms. Whereas if you're talking about gaming, gaming is like, it's more interactive, it's more experience based, it's more entertainment, it's fun. Whereas like the gamification, it doesn't have that entertainment aspect to it. It's just like, you're just given this like small stimuli from time to time, and that is completely different from like games. So if you're playing a game for 2 hours, you're continuously given that stimulation for 2 hours. So yeah, that's a difference. So when we think that we're trying to have gamification, we think that it's going to have the same response as someone like who's playing a game, but it's not. So.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. Anyone kind of have any final thoughts? Anything we should add?
Yeah, I was interested, like, what are you guys going to do with your projects? Like, what's the next step? I know not the research part, but like the product, like what, or the prototype.
We're gonna get investors, and we're gonna. That's.
A lot of user testing, because usability is one of the major factors, I would say, in development process.
Has anyone here done their user testing? I'm just curious to see if we're all kind of in we're like attempting. That's the scary part. Hey, like, oh crap! Now I have to take what I've done and see if people like it.
But at least yeah, you go ahead.
My domain expert, so the SLP, he actually tried it on his kids, and it was really cool to see it, even though it wasn't like official or clinical testing or anything. It was like the first time children used the game, and so it was just a taste of what the testing could be in the future.
Guys, we got another question that I actually really like too. Maybe we could do time for one. I think we're gonna do this one. Is there a link between gamification and the structures of cryptocurrency? Does the ability to study and learn the rules of motivation and learning about something like finance?
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah, I mean, you look at like Carrie's project and something like that, learning financial and stuff like that through gamification, I think. And it's a confusing world, cryptocurrency. Learning the ins and outs, learning how to be successful in that realm is a lot of work, and it's very confusing. So finding a way to gamify that and I guess simplify it in a sense would definitely be a huge reward for those wanting to step into that sector.
I think too, like even more so than just like helping people who are interested in, like there's a lot of scams with cryptocurrency, so it could help just give more awareness of like the scams and stuff. It's like, oh, spend $1,000 on my fun fancy Twitter ad and then you get like $100,000 profit, wahoo, right? So just like informing people about a concept and allowing them to sort of like have the means to sort of approach it at their own understanding through a way that's kind of like delivered in a fun, engaging way kind of thing.
I feel like Wealthsimple kind of does that already too, because like it's not really a gamified experience, but it like, I don't know,
it makes it easier for you.
That reminds me, because there's this new Visa card. I got like an ad for it where you literally like if you use it, like you put money on your credit card, and if you use it, you like get Bitcoin as the reward. It's really interesting. I was like doing stuff like looking at it, but
I was thinking about the gamification and gaming. I didn't include this in his research, but I saw this live show in the UK. So what Save the Children did was they have these old school arcades like in the airports, like King of Fighters or Taken. So when you put in the coin goes down to like this box, and all of the donations go to like these NGOs or the NHS, the National Health Services. So I also think that that's like gamification. Like you're engaging someone with the game, and they're putting in coins, and that coin is going to the donation or charity. So that is a different type of gamification, but it's a really interesting concept, like how this whole concept of gamification games can be used in other areas.
so fascinating. I think that brings us to the end of our panel, guys. And if you enjoyed it, if anyone has any questions or wants to connect with any individual presenters, you can send an email to digitalmedia@ryerson.ca, and I believe that link will also be in the chat. But congratulations, everyone. Great research.
Yeah, look at us go.
All right. Well, on to the next.
Ooh. Yeah, let's get it. Okay, bye.